You know, one of the things that fascinates me is how people get into supply chain. I fell into it quite by accident, but that's another story. This week, we're going to hear from Maria Villablanca all about how she got into supply chain, coming right up. So, Maria, great to meet you again. It's a question that a lot of people ask, how we get into different careers. How on earth did you get into supply chain?
You know, it's funny because I ask the same question to people whenever I meet them, and I would say that the bulk majority of people fell into it. At least people my age, right? So I'm sure nowadays people can go or they do study supply chain from the outset, and that's what they want to get into. I didn't study supply chain. I was on track I think I wanted to be a lawyer. I studied business. And for one thing or another, I didn't finish university. I had to leave university for family reasons. And I got this job. I decided to just take an adventure. And I got this job in Chile, in Latin America, where I was born. And well, I wasn't raised. I was born, families from there. And it was a job in the food manufacturing space in a winery, running a joint venture between a California winery and a cooperative of wineries in Chile. And I initially started in what was then called import-export, which was effectively doing bills of lading, sourcing, procurement, handling everything related to the manufacturing and supply chain process. And I fell in love with it. I was fascinated by the intricacy, complexity, the depth of different types of things that you could do within the supply chain. I did that for about 5 years. It also made me a bit of a wine snob. So a lot of people don't know that, but I can't drink certain wines because I've been working in it for so long. It's an awesome job, an amazing job from farm to table, as it were, all the way through. I understood those processes in the 90s back then, when it was a bit different and a bit difficult. Collaborated with a lot of foreign companies because there was a lot of investment in Chile at the time from different companies. And since then, I have been fascinated by supply chain because they literally make the world go round. And you look at what we did during the pandemic, we kept the world turning. During closures, we kept hospitals going, and we get men to the moon, hopefully to Mars next. That is the supply chain. I feel it's an absolutely important job. And I love to highlight that whenever I can.
It's a fascinating industry, and I hesitate to say how many years I've been in it. Over 50, almost. But I think it's the engineering of nature of supply chain that people love. There's so many moving parts, and if you're into analytics, there's lots of things you can do there. If you're into the sort of physical supply chain, there is.
Yeah.
What sort of advice would you give to people who are keen to get into the supply chain or find out more about it? What is it? They don't really teach it at school, do they?
Well, no, not in elementary or in high school or anything like that. You have to go to university to do that, and by then, who knows about supply chain, right? The one good thing that did come out of the pandemic is that it elevated the profile of supply chain. It's mainstream media topic now. You can turn on the news, you can read newspapers or do whatever, and people go on TikTok and people are talking about supply chain. So I think that's one positive thing, and hopefully it will attract people. Now, in terms of the kind of profile, and I get asked this question as well, what kind of skills will the supply chain leader of the future need? I think if you're going to get into supply chain, know that this is an area that is exciting. It's got an opportunity to innovate and actually drive purpose and change as well. Some of the biggest polluters are supply chains. And so working within supply chains is an opportunity to change the way that the world consumes, the way that the world the way that we deal with sustainability and different types of issues like that. I think in terms of the skills, it's not just about engineering, although having an engineering type brain is very helpful. But I think it's equal parts commerciality, operational, getting stuff done, but understanding that you're doing this for the greater purpose of a business. Someone who's purpose driven. I'd like to see supply chains that are sustainable, equitable. I'd like to see supply chains that don't have forced labor. All of those things are important in supply chain. Being someone who's people driven, technical as well. So having a technical understanding is extremely valuable and important, but we still need people. So all of those things in equal parts really makes a good supply chain leader. And I think if you're going to get into supply chain, it's an exciting field.
Certainly is. I think I posted something about this on LinkedIn a while ago, and it was, like what are the qualities of a great supply chain manager? And I had a particular client of ours in mind, and it was interesting. I think this person epitomizes really all of the great qualities of supply chain manager. They're incredibly smart, incredibly good with people. A very good leader, very really across the numbers and understanding performance of the supply chain commercially as well as service performance, and I think it's a fascinating mix that really makes a great supply chain manager. So if someone was watching this and thought supply chain, I've kind of been looking around at that, how would you suggest people get into it? What's a good first step?
I think the first step is listening to podcasts like this one, and really seeing what's out there in terms of content. There's great free content available to people around what is supply chain and the impact of it. So that's the first step. The second step is to look out for people within, say, different networks that are doing the job. And then lastly, of course, there are great universities with amazing programs. There's trade associations. There's people at all levels that you can look up to, whether from diverse backgrounds as well, to see how to get into the supply chain field. There's a ton of jobs. As a matter of fact, we're desperately looking for the next generation to get into supply chain. So I think really there's a wealth of information out there. Just knock on doors, as it were, proverbial, and try to get as much information as possible.
Some great tips. I always say to people, get into the local industry associations, whether there's a supply chain or logistics association, and just get in and meet people and network and start finding out more about it. But
100%.
Maria, some great tips, and always interesting to hear how people get into supply chain. But great to talk to you again. Thanks for joining us, and we'll put some links down below so you can follow up with Maria and look at some of the things that she's talking about on her podcast and so on as well. Thanks for joining us.